The real way to make a difference is to make a fortune.
5, 6, 7, 8 to the 1.
So I asked this question to your fellow cast members and Annie Wiseman, the creator of the show, and I would love to get your thoughts on it as well. This show just oozes with style, has such complexly drawn characters and rich themes. What greater truths has Greta, this narrative and its themes, revealed to you? Has it equipped you with a new set of tools about how to live and not live your life, if I may ask?
Wow. What a question. When I got this audition, a lot of the internal dialogue that Sheila has about Greta was like shocking and upsetting, right?
Sure.
And when I got the audition, I didn't get a script, so I just was getting the scenes like out of context. And I remember being like, a couple years ago, I said to my reps, I'm like, oh, like I'm plus sized and I have no illusions about how I look, but I don't think I'm hideous. If society thinks that my body is a problem, I don't, Yeah. So I was like, I don't know that I really want to do roles like that anymore because it doesn't fit me. Right. So I wasn't psyched about it. And my manager was like, no, this is a cool project. Like, I really think when you test for it, we're going to get a script, you'll get more context, and then let's see. Okay. So I said, okay, I trust him. So then when I got the script and I saw how much Sheila talks that way about herself, before you even meet me, I went, it doesn't matter if I was like skinny as a rail or looking like me, or if I was twice as big as me or any other kind of iteration in between. She has an issue. And so for me, suddenly, for the first time, what I looked like felt really empowering, that it felt really like amazing to look like how I looked, to play opposite somebody like Rose Byrne and do a role like this where it mattered what I looked like so that I could own it and feel really great about it. And then like express that on camera. So that's the long way around to answer your question and say, like, I'm walking away from this feeling great about how I look and feeling like I'm playing a character who ultimately can start to feel great about how she looks and just how she perceives herself in general, So that's really awesome.
Yeah, that tonal and emotional dance that's going on here that kind of leads into what you were talking about, like how there's certain parts of the show where you feel uncomfortable because you've never really seen any of these ideas really explored before, but then they're so real. Like after it, I may have a conversation with myself in my head thinking about like, wow, I really relate to some of those connection issues that Ernie and Greta have. And there's so many moments in here that are explored where I'm just like, this is as true to life as it really gets, while it's also having fun with, Craig Gillespie's style of like the camera looks like it's about to mow you over, but it's so fun.
Yeah, totally. Right. And I love what Craig did, in establishing the style in the first episode. Because physical, like the camera sort of never really stops moving.
Yeah.
And so like you as the audience are really pulled into that. You're really like physically a part of the world through that point of view, which is so awesome. And we had other phenomenal directors, Steph Lang and Liza Anderson, who also like, it just kind of made a lot of sense and really informed what we were doing. But yeah, I do think that the conversations coming out of the show are really interesting. And I know a lot of women specifically who are struggling with the subject matter. And at the same time, most of them say to me, I'm really glad I watched it because I feel that the conversations that are happening are not ones that are happening all the time. I think maybe similarly to what you're saying is like, it's making you go, oh, wow, I've never seen that depicted or discussed on television. Now we can talk about it, or now it's like, now it's there. Now these characters are dealing with it, So I love that about it.
Yeah. This may be a tricky question, so feel free to provide.
You've thrown me 2 tricky questions already, so I'm ready for you now.
All right. So there's a couple lines that I wanted to bring up to you that I thought were very impactful, and they got me, like I was saying, like got me thinking about certain things, or maybe evaluating my own relationship that I have with my wife. And so there's that scene where you're talking with Ernie, Greta's talking with Ernie, and she says, like, when we got this house, the kitchen was ours. It was very open, and she liked that is, an area where you can have conversations and be open, which perfectly reflects who Greta is. And then when you look at Ernie, that having a love for the basement and privacy, it shows a lot about him and how he is. And then you have this beautiful moment of where both of them are opening up, and what can come out of that. And so as hard as those conversations are, and I've had plenty of them in my life, where you'll have something that you may not want to be revealing to your partner, or some thoughts, and then when the moment comes, you feel so free. And then as we see with their characters, like it blossoms, and we see it take off from there. And I'm very anxious to see where we go forward with those characters. So I'm just curious, like, what were your thoughts when you had that moment where they're talking about, the kitchen and the basement?
What I really related to
Mhm.
about shooting that scene in particular is it is really real, right? Like it's exactly what you're saying. And I think it's also what we keep circling around about this show, which is it's more like life, like I keep going around about this idea lately about how streaming shows, even though they say, oh, comedy or drama or shows on streaming networks seem to sort of blur these boundaries more, or almost come into these categories of like, I don't know what it is. And I
Yeah.
almost feel like Physical is in that zone of like, it is a comedy, but it's a dark comedy, but there's a lot of heavy drama in it. And I think that's like what life is like. And I think how I can relate to shooting that scene in conversations I have with my boyfriend, or like with friends or family members, or just when you hit up against something that's like, well, we can't move past this moment until we address this moment.
Mhm.
And I think that's what life is like, so I really related to that scene, and it was hard to shoot, which for me as an actor is an awesome, fun challenge when it's hard, but it's not always like jumping in. You're going, how am I tackling this? How am I going to do
Right.
it? But the more I thought to myself, this is what life is like the difficulty of navigating a conversation like this is
Mhm.
what life is like.
Yeah.
So, it makes sense. It kind of just falls right into that space.
Yeah, it's so raw, and there's so much honesty to it. Like even the part where she says, we're all sickos inside. Uh,
Yeah, right.
Conversations that you don't want to have with anybody, but that, I mean, it's true. So I just thought that was really great that it took the time to have a moment like that. And it's very seldom that I'll be watching something with my wife or whoever's watching with their significant other, friends or family, and then they're watching something, and then something kind of unexpected pops up, and then you have a conversation for the rest of the night about it. And so it's just really nice that this show provides that in so many ways.
So funny because you say that, and you're reminding me of so when we wrapped the season, we couldn't have normally you have like a wrap party, but
Yeah.
we couldn't because of COVID, right? Like
Sure.
not safe for everyone to gather at that time in March. And so for a gift for us, they let us see like a rough cut of the pilot. They kind of sent everyone a link, and they said at this time, if you sign it, So I was like, oh, so excited. And so my boyfriend and I was like, come over for dinner. We're gonna watch the pilot. So we're watching this, and he turns to me like 15 minutes into the first episode, and he goes, do you talk to yourself like this in your head?
Yeah.
Like he was like shocked. And I went, yeah. And he went, do all women talk to themselves like this? And I was like,
Don't you?
I mean, yeah, pretty much, like most women I know. And so I think similarly to you, like it spurred this conversation between us where he was like, holy Moses, like I'm shocked that you deal with yourself that way. And I was like, I'm shocked that you don't. But if you met
Right.
us too, I'm Queen Neuroses and he's like Mr. Placid. So it's like, couldn't be. But But yeah, it like really sparks these conversations, I think, like a peek inside maybe people who, especially in the 80s, when we weren't sort of talking about these kinds of things,
Yeah.
where everyone kind of looked like this sort of picture perfect storybook life, 2.5 kids or whatever it was. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, on the inside, it's not like that. But I think now we're having more of the conversation of like, no, it's not like that for almost anybody, but you're trying to create this illusion like it is, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought it was interesting what you said earlier. It made me think of like the relationship that you have with your boyfriend and what he said. Made me think of that line. What was it? I have a hard time opening up. That's what Sheila says to Greta, and then
Yeah.
Greta says, "Well, I'm too good at it." And then she says, "Opposite problem, same result." Really great writing right there, but that's also another moment where it just send my mind running. So also would love to know what you thought about that line. If it had, how do you approach something that like that may have more of an impact emotionally on the audience versus something that maybe inform different things?
Mm. Yeah, I think that for me, when I read that in the script, it was like a hugely telling line about Greta as a person. I mean, I don't want to get too actory, but like whenever I read something, I get like whatever my initial impressions are, like, or my instincts are, for whatever reason, I think this character is like this, or that. Or then there's like little clues in the script, like she bites her fingers, you're like, oh, she's nervous or whatever, right? But when I got more scripts, so I could see like a bigger picture of Greta, that line in particular was like, oh, well, that's why this
Mhm.
super rich, pretty nice lady, right? In general, like, but it keeps talking about how she has no friends. And like, I was like, well, what? Like, I kept reading the scripts going, I don't totally get why. And then I'm like, oh, because she's like an oversharer in
Yeah,
a town where everybody's a little bit more like, would rather talk about the weather or, like talk about
yeah,
more servicey things. She's just like, yeah. And, she's saying, my kids threw up all over the house or something. And it's like, oh, like, we didn't want to hear about it. Like, so it gave me a real clue into, maybe in a way that if Sheila came across as cold or a little stoic, maybe like in the way that she kind of holds herself back or keeps her arm's length from people, that Greta is too much of a, in my family we call it a glom, like just somebody who's like, I want to hug you and like, be best friends. And that's not healthy either, like,
yeah.
so finding, how do you have a real friendship? Like, how do you really, and I think, I mean, gosh, you've talked to Annie. She's so brilliant. Like, she's wrote a really real female friendship to me, the way
Yeah.
these two women have to sort of navigate becoming friends with each other.
Yeah. So in that initial script that you got from Annie Weisman, who wrote the first episode, was there a particular moment of reading for your character that you thought this is who she is? Like, this, was there a launching moment for you that that greatly informed who she is?
Well, it wasn't in the first script. It was actually that moment in that car scene was a big clue to me, I think, who Greta is. But I didn't have all that. Initially, one of the scenes that hit me was, I think it's my second scene in the pilot, where I pop into her window and I'm like, good morning, are you okay? And
Yeah.
Greta's going a mile a minute. And there were a couple of times in the script where she not quite interrupts somebody, but almost finishes their sentence the wrong way, like
Mhm.
assuming they're going to say something bad about her. And that scene we shot was like this monologue I had where I went, and I kind of almost rattled it off as quick as I could, because the idea for me was Greta just wants to talk to fill the silence so nobody feels uncomfortable and is like, okay, have a good day, bye. Like, I got out everything and you couldn't reject me, or I'm rejecting myself before you can reject me. And that was a big clue to me, of who she was. I was like, oh, okay. That's kind of a good place to start.
What is the timing like of Sheila's thoughts? I'm not sure if they played them on set or if you have to kind of figure out what the timing will be in those moments where it may be silent, but you're having to react as naturally as possible to how her face may be, but yet she's, like you said, like may have all these thoughts running.
So it was really cool, actually. We shot most of the stuff two ways. So we would shoot the scene one time with no internal dialogue. So you'd have to kind of memorize it as though that wasn't there.
Hmm.
So it was like Sheila's line, Greta's line, Sheila's line, Greta's line, right? And we would just shoot it. And then we would go back and usually have somebody from off camera reading her internal dialogue. Whether I could hear it or not was kind of irrelevant because I'm not reacting to that, right? So I'm just sitting there waiting for an answer, or, like you said, just like going, what's going on. And so that's how we would kind of find the timing of that, or that would, I can't speak to Rose, like how it informed her character, but like that's how we would sort of deal with that that piece of the puzzle. But it was interesting, sometimes sitting there being like, why aren't you answering me?
Yeah. So as we wrap up, I'm curious, because it's something that you mentioned earlier about not understanding something right away, but then it occurred to you later, like what the truth of it may be. And I'm curious if it's important to you as an actor to understand every aspect of the material, because there's certain things that happen in here, even visually or thematically, where I'm like, I'm just curious about it. It's very fascinating. I don't know exactly what to make of it just yet, but the feeling it's given me is really interesting. And I'm curious if that's your feeling of moments where you're reading it or you're shooting it and you're not, I don't know exactly like what this moment means, but it's very curious to me.
I think I don't even think every project is different. Every project is different for
Right.
me, that you approach slightly differently. But even sometimes every episode is different, or even the way you're shooting a scene is different. The cool thing about this, sometimes I do feel like I understand something thematically, and sometimes I just have a gut instinct about it as like a human being. Like, well, this is what I think this moment means, person to person. I will say, this was the first experience I ever had with Craig. I was shooting the first shot of the first day, right, with Craig. And so we shot a couple of things, and we were not starting with the first scene of the first episode. It was the stuff at the school.
Yeah.
And so he was like, oh, let's shoot the car pulling away. Okay, let's shoot this. Okay. So it was like these little moments we were shooting. So I was like, okay. And then we took like a little mini break, and they had to, move some equipment and stuff. And Craig said to me and Rose, come over here. We went over to the monitor, and he had rough cut what we just shot.
Oh, wow.
And then he played a song on his phone at the same time, so we could kind of get a sense of like music with the shots. So we saw like zoom, 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 like, so you're saying like this camera movement, like in and out.
Right.
And so immediately I got to see like 4 or 5 shots kind of cut together with this movement. And so I went, oh, like that's what the show is going to look like, which gave me such an interesting picture in my head of like sort of how to use myself in the frame, or maybe give him stuff he was looking for.
Yeah.
So it was the first time I also got, on the first day of shooting, a sense of like like a style sense, which was like really like totally different. So I never sort of added that into my performance before, but like it was a great addition. It was a great thing to have for this project, because like you said, it is so specific with the camera and the way it moves and how it's used. So